In planning this conference, one of the key issues that I was very keen for us to address was the representation of enemies. And I wanted to just flag up what I think are two very significant historical events which have shaped the context in which we now think about the question of enemies. The first event is the end of the Cold War. Pretty much immediately in the early 1990s, foreign policy analysts started to talk about the end of the Cold War in terms of a problem that they called enemy deprivation syndrome. It's a curious turn of phrase. If the enemy, in the form of the Soviet Union, has quit the battlefield, then what exactly are Western militaries for? Who are they deterring? What threats are they defending us against? The second major event, and I mean, of course, the 11th of September 2001, seemed like it might change that. It appeared to many people at the time, I think, that after 9/11, the problem of enemy deprivation syndrome might be about to be resolved, at least for the foreseeable future. Radical Islamists and Arabs, it appeared, might be going to fill the enemy-shaped hole that the Russians had left, perhaps in the form of a historic clash of civilizations. Have Arabs and Muslims been unfairly demonized since 9/11? If they have, how are they depicted as enemies? What kind of political and cultural resources are brought to bear nowadays in talking about and conceiving of enemies? I can think of nobody better to introduce a discussion of that topic than our speaker this evening. I am truly delighted to welcome Dr. Dr Shaheen.
I'd like to start before I address the documentary. There are a few quotes that I've dug up that I think are rather relevant to this particular gathering. If we look at Lenin in the 20s, who said, in effect, for us, the cinema is the most important of all the arts. And at the same time, Lenin made this comment. Adolf Zucker, the president of Paramount Pictures in the United States, said, quote, as an avenue of propaganda, as a channel for conveying thought and opinion, the movies are unequaled by any form of communication. The quote that has endured perhaps more than any other is the Goebbels quote in the 30s, Germany's propaganda minister. Quote, the most brilliant propaganda technique confines itself to a few points, he declared, and as you pointed out, and repeats them over and over, end quote. There's an Arab proverb, I'm sure Goebbels took it from the Arab proverb, called, by repetition, even the donkey learns. So we have these repetitive images of Arabs that have been with us for more than a century. I started writing the film book in 1984, just as I finished the TV Arab. And, you know, I've got more than 1,000 films in The Real Bad Arabs, How Hollywood Vilifies a People. No academic with a modicum of intelligence would watch more than 1,000 films, but then I've never been quite typical. But I did. You'll see clips from about 60 pre-9/11 films. So, Phil, when we talk about images of these images, Arab equal Muslim equal godless enemy other, have always been with us. You know, there are about 1,100 pre-9/11 films that have vilified Arabs in one way or another. And in dozens of TV programs, ranging from 24 to Sleeper Cell, all of a sudden, American Arabs and American Muslims who have up until this time been invisible on American television. So all of a sudden, we had an identity. We were the neighbor you were supposed to fear. And this was being advanced not only in these popular TV shows, but it was being picked up in the news, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And we'll get to that in the Q&A. I look forward to hearing your insights. once the film is shown. And I thank you very, very much for your kind attention.
Arabs are the most maligned group in the history of Hollywood. They're portrayed basically as subhumans. Untermenschen, a term used by Nazis to vilify gypsies and Jews. These images have been with us for more than a century. And what I tried to do is to make visible what too many of us seem not to see, a dangerously consistent pattern of hateful Arab stereotypes. Stereotypes that rob an entire people of their humanity. All aspects of our culture project the Arab as villain. That is a given. There is no deviation.
You are late.
1,000 apologies, oh patient one.
You have it then.
I had to slit a few throats, but I got it.
Disney's Aladdin was seen by millions of children worldwide. It was hailed as one of Disney's finest accomplishments. But the film recycled every old degrading stereotype from Hollywood's silent black and white past.
You must be hungry. Here you go.
You'd better be able to pay for that. Do you know what the penalty is for stealing?
No, please!
The Arab is one-dimensional caricature, cartoon cutouts used by filmmakers as stock villains and as comic relief. And so over and over we see Arabs in movies portrayed as buffoons, their only purpose being to deliver cheap laughs.
And I read my lines way over the top. And, you know, it's like, sit down, you will obey, or I'll kill you in the name of Allah, you know, stuff like that. And the director went nuts, and he was like, that was brilliant, Ahmad. Let me see you do it again, but this time with more, you know, Arab, you know how your people are very, you know, he's trying to say that we're angry, and I was just like, okay, angry, is that what you want? Yes, yes. So I did it one more time, and I got a call the next morning that they want to use me in this movie. And I started laughing on the phone because I wasn't even, like, I was making fun of the role. I wasn't trying to be like that. And that's what they want, though.
Remember that when news of the bombing broke, reporters and politicians, nearly everybody, rushed to judgment without any proof whatsoever.
A U.S. government source told CBS News that it has Middle East terrorism written all over it.
The attack in Oklahoma City appears to have a familiar mark.
This was done with the attempt to inflict as many casualties as possible. That is a Middle Eastern trait.
The fact that it was such a powerful bomb in Oklahoma City immediately drew investigators to consider deadly parallels that all have roots in the Middle East.
ABC News has learned that the FBI has asked the U.S. military to provide up to 10 Arabic speakers to help in the investigation.
Jack Valente, president of the Motion Picture Association of America, has said, quote, Washington and Hollywood spring from the same DNA, end quote. Since the founding of the State of Israel in 1948, our support has never wavered. Every American administration has made it clear whose side we're on. In contrast, Washington's policymakers have failed to support the millions of Palestinians who have been made refugees and who have lived lives of poverty and squalor as a result, while policies impact opinions. So equally unjust is how Hollywood has presented the conflict. Movies repeatedly depict Palestinians as terrorists, making it seem that all Palestinians are evil.
Made in America, Colonel.
Palestinians in refugee camps, Palestinians who are victimized, who are killed, innocent Palestinians. These images are denied us. Now, why are they denied us? Is there an unwritten code in Hollywood saying we cannot and will not humanize Palestinians? I mean, why can't we humanize Palestinians in the same manner in which we humanize Israelis? Is not the life of a Palestinian child, media-wise, Hollywood-wise, politically-wise, as important, as humane, as valuable as the life of an Israeli child? And if the answer to that is yes, why can't we see that on silver screens? We've unlearned many of our prejudices against blacks, Native Americans, Jews, other groups. Why can't we unlearn our prejudices against Arabs and Muslims? What matters is not to remain silent. I think whenever we see anyone being vilified on a regular basis, we have to speak out, whether we're image makers or not. We have to take a stand and say this is morally and ethically wrong to demonize a people.
The floor is now open to you for your responses to it.
There are stereotypes which you highlight very effectively, but there is the problem of how people interpret those stereotypes. The second thing is, the film compares Islamophobia of the present with a 1930s kind of rerun of what could happen again like fascism. I put it to you that today's critic crunch is nothing compared with the conditions that brought about Hitler in the early 30s. So, you know, liberalism, it seems to me, doesn't give a full cinematic or political account of what's really happening in the demonization that does exist, but I think cannot be compared with the demonizations of the past.
Thoroughly enjoyable film, I must say, and really interesting insights. Couple of problems, though, for me. I don't know the law in America, but in Britain now we do have hate speech, for example, is a crime. And it seems to me that what you're suggesting is more polite behaviour, more polite representation. And, you know, while we've no doubt there's demonisation, you could have very polite behaviour, a crackdown on free speech, which we already have, while Britain is in occupation of other people's countries and blowing the hell out of them. And I do have a problem with this fixation of let's be more nice and polite in how we represent people, rather than let's do something about the reality which underpins a lot of that representation. You know, there are very real things, surely, that have both underpinned and reinforced and led to that sort of representation, and these things come and go as a result of our dealing with reality, as opposed to, I'm worried about, litigiously tackling stereotyping.
First of all, I'm not saying to be nice, and I'm not getting into the politics of what's taking place. I'm just saying, I'm talking about the cinema. And I'm saying for more than 100 years, there have been more than 1,000 films that have vilified Arabs and Muslims. And that has a telling effect. Period, exclamation point.
Thanks. I'm a little bit worried with the distinction that seems to be cropping up in some of the questions between reality and film. Not because there isn't a difference, but because I think, you know, you've made the point about the possibility of impact. But I wanted to go back to your final point and not put a dampener on the optimism of the, you know, new filmmakers coming through with different perspectives, but to go back to an earlier point that you made and ask you whether, in fact, patterns of media ownership and the relationship of media ownership to politics might not serve to perpetuate these stereotypes and therefore might not serve to stifle those new voices that may come through.
We haven't had a breakthrough film. You know, for gays, it was Philadelphia. For African Americans, maybe The Defiant Ones. You know, we need a breakthrough film where, you know, someone really has an impact, and we haven't had that yet. A big, major Hollywood production where you can cheer for the hero, okay, who happens to be an Arab American. I don't know, but that's what's needed. And I think if there's a stronger presence within the industry, just with women today, with African Americans and Asian Americans, it will make a difference. You know, you don't have a tendency to vilify or demonize someone if you work side by side with him and her. And then I would like you to remember, I guess the closing comment that I say at the documentary, no better, no worse than anyone else, you know? And to speak out whenever you see this happening, and not to remain silent, regardless of you know, the person or individuals who are being targeted. That's the hardest thing to do, I think, at some times. Anyway, you've been a great audience, and thank you very much.